We're going to work with two-point perspective today. So I have my sheet of paper. I have my 18-inch ruler. Remember, at my classroom, you can only use an 18-inch ruler. You may use a 12-inch ruler. You may not use my 24-inch rulers. And I have my preferred pencil for a two-point perspective, which is a mechanical pencil. If you have a regular pencil, that's just fine. You just need a pencil. First thing I'm going to start off with is I'm going to start off with my horizon line. I prefer to put my horizon line towards the top of my paper because that provides me with ample space to work with my buildings on the ground. So I'm going to draw my horizon line lightly, which is a horizontal line which separates the ground from the sky of my paper. I'm doing two-point perspective, so I want to add 2 points. I want 1 point to be on the left and 1 point to be on the right. I prefer to keep my points when I do two-point perspective in the sky region of my paper. I try to put them as far or as close to the edge of the paper as I possibly can. So over here, I'm going to put a point right here. I'm going to make these a little bit bigger so that way you can see them, but these are temporary, remember, so that means that I want to be able to erase them for the end of my project. And I think I'm going to put this one right there. So I have one on the left and one on the right. Very similar to one-point perspective, only I've added another point. Okay, so I'm going to start with my buildings. Remember, as an 8th grader, I need at least 5 buildings. So I'm going to start with one of my buildings. I'm going to start with a vertical line. The bigger or the longer the line you make, the bigger your building is going to be. So if you want a big building, then I would suggest starting with a longer line. If you want a smaller building, then you're going to make a smaller line. So now I'm going to start from the bottom of the line that I just drew, and I'm going to take it to one of my vanishing points. It does not really matter which vanishing point you start with, or if you start with the top or the bottom. I just tend to always start with the bottom. I don't know why. Now I'm going to go to the top on the same side and take it to the same vanishing point that I just drew to. So now I've created kind of a triangle on my paper. Okay, you can kind of see that, a triangle. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to do the same thing to the second vanishing point. Again, it does not matter which one I do first. It does not matter really which one of these lines that go to the vanishing point I do first. Just as long as I get all 4 of them drawn, that's what's really important. So now I have 2 triangle-like looking things on my paper. So that's the first step. Now, my next step to making this look more like a building and less like a triangle is I'm going to make a parallel line to my vertical line that I already have. I need to show where my building ends. Where does this building end? That's what I'm going to decide now. Key things. It has to be parallel to this line. My ending vertical lines need to be parallel to my first vertical line. It also has to end on the ground. That means that my building cannot float up into the sky. That it needs to make sure that wherever it is actually ending on the ground region of my paper. So my building is not floating. Trick that I showed you guys last year for making parallel lines. Line that ruler up with the vertical line you've already drawn. Slide it to whichever direction it is that you want to start with. It really doesn't matter if you go left or right first. Decide how big you want that building to be and draw your line in between the 2 lines that are going to the vanishing point. I'm going to do the same thing now to go to the other direction. I'm lining my ruler up with the line that the first vertical line I drew, and now I'm sliding it the opposite direction this time. How big do I want my building? I'm ending, and I'm drawing that 3rd parallel line. So now I have 3 vertical lines that are parallel. I also have 4 diagonal lines. Sometimes these lines are not quite as diagonal as others. Sometimes they're very diagonal. But as long as you've taken them to the vanishing point, you are doing it correctly. Now, I need to make the top of my building. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from where I finished with that third or the second vertical line or third vertical line that I drew, I'm going to start where that intersects with one of the lines that I drew to my vanishing point, and I'm going to draw it to the opposite vanishing point. So here's where they intersect. I'm lining my ruler up with the vanishing point on the opposite side, and I'm going to take it to the opposite vanishing point. Okay, so now I have drawn it to the opposite vanishing point. Now I'm going to do the same thing with this vanishing point. I'm going to line it up. I'm going to draw it to vanishing point over here. And there is the finished building. Now what I need to do is I need to erase my extra lines that go to the vanishing point and move on to my next building. I can also erase this part of the horizon line that runs through my building. I can erase that. Okay, so I would finish erasing my lines, and my first building is completed.